All right, good evening. I'm glad that you all are here tonight. I do want to take a second, if I can, on this 100 points of light business here. So I don't know if you all know this or not, but I have been a part of the Edmond congregation here since I came to college, and I hate to admit when that was, but it was 96. I know, right? That means I'm old. But even before that, the reason that one of the main reasons that I came to church here at the Edmond Church of Christ was because the outreach ministry that this congregation did with the Broken Bow Church of Christ. So Gene Gobin was my preacher growing up. He baptized me into the faith back on that fateful day where I made my mom wake up having pulled an all-night shift at the hospital and said today was the day. So I still remember that. I'm glad she forgave me. But back in those days, we had a lot of visitation from the church back up at the congregation of Broken Bow up in Nebraska. Sometimes it was aligned with the start of pheasant season, which I understand that. That's okay too. But a very young Randy Roper, actually, and there's some pictures out there somewhere, led our very, very small youth group through the True Love Wait series. So we've got some really great pictures of me waiting for true love, and of course coming here to Oklahoma. I did find out with my wife Jen. I'm glad that she's here too. But I just want to let you know, when we talk about giving, when we talk about Commission Sundays, when we talk about 100 Points of Light and how this church has outreach that we don't even understand or comprehend, I'm not the prettiest face, but I'm one of the faces that represents all the great work that this congregation has done because of that outreach, because of that ministry. Again, one of the main reasons that I came here and have been here ever since. It's a perfect place for our family. My folks, we've convinced them to become Oklahomans too, although we all still root Nebraska on the weekends, but that's a little more painful these days than it used to be. But it's painful there too, right? So I'm feeling both sides of that stab. But just wanted to say thank you, right? And those ministries work. They're effective, they're powerful, they work in ways we just don't understand. And so I just wanted to say that, our family is one of the byproducts of all the great things that this church has done. So I really appreciate that. So having said that, I appreciate the introduction, Neil. I do normally teach at the Sojourners class. We used to be the honeymooners, and then we were the young families, and then I think we were something else, and now we're the Sojourners. So we are literally sojourning our way through life and names of our Bible class. But I've had lifelong friends from my college days in that class, and it's been great. I love that class. I love the camaraderie that we have, and I see a lot of selfless leaders in that group. And so when we talk about selfless leadership, we're going to talk about selfish leadership too. I think that one of the things I want you all to come away with is that every one of us is a leader, right? You do not have to be a CEO of a company to be considered a leader. Now, a lot of the materials that are out there, of course, are written from a business perspective. I meant to bring it. I bought a book. I was like, when Brent told me he wanted me to do this, I was like, I'll go buy a new book, because it's always an excuse to buy a book, right? So I bought a book among the other books that I have, and this book was literally like probably the next to most awful book I've ever read when it comes to actual leadership and what it means to be a selfless person. And I was going to bring it because there's a quote in it that basically says, nothing that you do matters anyway, so you may as well be selfish. I'm like, this is a terrible book. Like, it was definitely not biblical in nature. It was like more business focused, but it was awful. So I didn't bring it, so I won't recommend it. I wasn't going to recommend it anyway, but there are a lot of great materials out there. We will definitely cover some of those materials here tonight, and I will be happy to share the information on where I pulled some of this stuff as we go forward. So that being said, if this works the way I think it should, got to click in the right place. Oh, there we go. Okay, so how would you define? Let's start on the bad side. How would you all define selfish? And Neil and my classmates over here will know I am not shy to wait it out if I don't have a participative audience. That's kind of the way that I like to do things. So how would you define selfish in your own words?
Self-centered.
Self-centered, good.
Looking out for yourself and no one else.
Looking out for yourself and no one else. I like that. Yeah. Vain, glory. I like the word vain. Good. Anything else jump out at you? Don't worry, I have a word cloud where we'll talk about that. So if we can get some more words out there too. So selfish right? From a Oxford Dictionary perspective. Oh, that camera moves with me. That's a little scary right there. Okay, it's lacking consideration for others, concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure, right? So just from a dictionary perspective, when we look at what it means to be selfish, like we're going to look at the flip side of it. That's the whole point of tonight, right? But to kind of know the ground that we're laying on, let's talk about what it means to be selfish first. So I'm going to show you these pictures. Now, there was a lot of debate in our household about what pictures to show to help incite some terms or thoughts or feelings or emotions about selfish people. So do any of these people jump out at you as being selfish? I guess they're not all people, right? So characters, let's go with characters. So what words or emotions are elicited when you see these types of people? Pride, good. I like it. It actually works on a couple of different levels for the one up in the upper left there. Good. Do you recognize them all? Deceitful. So I'll be honest with you, the one I have the most trouble with is the upper middle one. I was told that that's from As Good as It Gets. Thank you. I was assured, I've seen that once before. I was assured he's a very selfish person. So I'm like, oh, he's cute with the dog. I'll put him up there too. But yeah. So when you see these, like, there's some leaders in here for sure, right? So we've got Loki, right, from a Avengers perspective. We've got Voldemort. Everybody knows him. I put the bottom middle one there. Does anyone recognize that one? Ebenezer Scrooge from the Muppet one, right? So that's on my heart.
Like that one.
I know that one's on my heart because that's a family favorite for us. It's one of our Christmas traditions is a Muppet Christmas Carol. So now he transforms, of course, right? By the end of the movie, things are much better, but Tiny Tim and Kermit are definitely having a hard time with him in the early parts of the movie. So, and then we've got Commodus from Gladiator, right? Everybody kind of hates him if you've seen Gladiator.
The best part about the Commodus was his, so Russell Crowe, I can't remember Gladiator, right?
Maximus Aurelius,
You know,
maybe?
father to a third. So,
Yes.
Okay, anyway, he's giving the speech about what it means to be a leader. And none of those things are what a Commodus is. And he says, can I not also have ambition? And he names all these other lorded over kind of attributes and qualities. So I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah. And we didn't pre-coordinate at all, I promise. Any other thoughts elicited from these pictures?
I think the upper middle one, that was mine. It was the first character I thought of when he asked me. What's interesting about him is he does things that appear really kind and nice, but he's doing them for his own gain, right? So it's not like you don't look at him, well, at the beginning you do. But towards the middle of the movie, you think, oh, he's doing nice things, but he's really doing them for a manipulative purpose, which is another aspect of selfishness.
Yeah. Manipulation, good. All right, great, good comments. Okay, so we built, I like visual aids. I don't usually teach with PowerPoint in the Sojourners class. So when we set up for this one, I was like, okay, the bar was set really high last week with some amazing PowerPoints. I was like, fine, I'll build some PowerPoints. We'll have some visual aids. It'll be great. So came across this word cloud approach for a few things too, right? Any words jump out here that we haven't mentioned so far? I've seen a bunch of them, right? Vain, right, was one that we talked about. I see greedy, immoral, judgmental, right? Suffocating and controlling are kind of interesting. Egotism, right? With Scar, we could have stabbing, right? Some sort of, or backstabbing, perhaps, literally and figuratively, I suppose. But so, I like to put this up there to kind of elicit some thoughts of ideas and concepts and themes behind the term, of a selfish leader. Victim. Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask, right? Have any of us ever had the experience of being with a poor, selfish leader that you'd care to share with the group? See, this is where I will just wait you out. Normally I say, what's my thing, right? I'll wait for the coffee to kick in, right, for the class. But, and any experiences with a selfish leader that someone would care to share?
Yes.
Go for it.
So
Thank you.
when I was in the military, one of my leaders chose our destination points off of Brigham so his wife could drive to where we were at, which didn't allow us to go do what all the other people didn't do. So we'd go like Wichita Falls, we'd go to like things that are just really close. When all the other people were going to Germany and going to Florida, and he did that just so he could have what he wanted, but didn't care about the whole city of people. And he ran everybody off.
Interesting. So, I think you've listed a lot of things right with somebody that we wouldn't want to strive to be like from a leader, from a selfless leader perspective, right? Ultimately with people being driven off, right? That's a testament to everybody's willingness to follow them too. So yeah, great example. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think all of us probably have in our mind's eye, a teaching, we had a teacher that we didn't prefer, that, wasn't super helpful, or a boss, or, and it can come in in a variety of environments, right? But there's a lot of opportunities for us to see and experience what a bad leader would look like. So really quick, I love what Proverbs says about things, right? So from a selfish perspective, I'll do it this way. This is from Proverbs 18, and I hop around a little bit, but it's all there if you'd like to look it up too. So an unfriendly man pursues selfish ends. He defies all sound judgment. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. Right, so that's an interesting one. No pleasure in understanding, but delights in his own opinions. A fool's lips bring him strife, and his mouth invites a beating. I kind of like that one, right? I've had a few leaders that I've come across in the past that I believe that their mouth was inviting a beating from somebody. I don't lay down the beatings, but I could see that it was being invited from someone, right? One who is slack in his work is brother to one who destroys, and he who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. All examples of things, behaviors, examples that kind of align with a lot of the pictures and the feelings and the emotions and the stories that we've had about what it means to be a bad leader. So having said all of that, right? Oh, I'm running. Oh, my Zoom meeting says it's going to end. That's going to be fantastic.
I think if you, join back on after.
I might have to, or I'll have to go fast. One of the two. We'll see. We'll see where we get. I came early just to make sure. All right. So how would you define selflessness then? What are some words that come to mind for that?
Putting others above yourself.
Perfect. Couldn't say it better myself. So you said putting others above yourself. Great. Anything else? Humble. Good. Helpful. Nice. Okay. Oxford Dictionary definition: concern more with the needs and wishes of others than with one's own. I had to reread it again. So I like that definition, right? It makes sense. When you put other people's interests first, and we actually have some Bible verses on that too, interestingly enough, that's what it means to be selfless.
So I heard a.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
can remember this, right? It's not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less.
Okay.
In other words, thinking about others.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a put down to yourself, right? It's the frequency that you think of others too. Good. I like that. I have more pictures, so while the Zoom call still works, do you recognize any of these characters from a selfless perspective? What words, what verbs are elicited from these kinds of pictures here? So there was a little bit of debate in our house about that one. I could have used the picture on both, actually, right? Because one can make the argument that one of those two people is a little selfish. My daughter was adamant that Jack is very selfless, so that he deserved to be on this list. But what's her name? Jack and Rose. Yeah, that door had room. You and I both know it. She was selfish, 100%. There was room on that door. Good point. Any of these others jump out at you? Do you know the upper left one? It's Bing Bong. I will promise you, we are the only Wednesday night class in the entire world that's talking about Bing Bong. I will promise you. So Bing Bong is from the movie Inside Out. And in that particular movie, Bing Bong is very sacrificial in helping the main character continue their story. And if you haven't seen Inside Out, that particular part is quite an emotional part. So keep that in mind. I won't give any spoilers away. I'm trying not to spoil movies. There is another movie that's fairly recent here with, our bottom left that I won't spoil, but that's Jane Foster. She's in the Thor movie. She is not a relative of ours. Well, I may want her to be, I suppose, from a heroic perspective. She is absolutely not, but there's definitely some selfless activities that she performs in a particular movie that you may or may not have seen as well. But other thoughts or comments, or other characters that maybe you would have put up on this list from a selfless perspective?
I guess,
Yeah, go ahead, back.
I was just gonna say, that characters portrayed on sacrificial, all of them. Just knowing the story, I don't think they wanted to sacrifice in the way they did what they did.
Yeah, all had some element of some sort of self-sacrifice. Yeah, I think that's right. That's absolutely right.
Who is the bottom left?
Bottom
middle.
of, it's from A Quiet Place, and I will not spoil that. Good eye. I will not spoil that one. That's the father figure from the movie A Quiet Place, and he is. It could be. What'd you say? Jack Ryan. He is also in Jack Ryan. I don't know that he's selfless in that particular role, or Jim from The Office. I'm not sure I'd say he was selfless in that particular role, but Quiet Place, good eye, exactly right. If you haven't seen it, it's a little bit of a nail biter, but he's very selfless in that one as well. My favorite one is it's Samwise Gamgee. So funny story. Let me divert for a second. So our oldest was on a recruiting trip to Oklahoma Christian for their engineering department, and I at the time we recognized that it was happening, and so we brought it up. There was a triple recruitment going on, right? So the school was recruiting Ty, right, our senior that's about to graduate. So they were recruiting him to the engineering department. They had brought in some students to eat lunch with us. So it was Professor Bigelow and a student, and Jen and I, 2 students, and Jen and I. And so they were recruiting Ty. Jen and I were trying to recruit one of their senior engineering students because he was a sharp cookie. Like, we were like, come work with us because we would love to have sharp people like you. And then Dr. Bigelow was recruiting Jen and I to come and teach. So they were trying to get Ty to go to this school there. They're trying to get Jen and I to go and teach there. And we were trying to get some of their students to come work with us. So it was a triple recruitment. But while we were there, we mentioned to Professor Bigelow, who's a huge Lord of the Rings fan, that Ty hasn't seen these movies. And he said, you will not be admitted to our engineering department if you don't watch these movies. So we started watching the extended editions. Jen and I both know who the actual hero of the movie is. It's not Frodo, it's Sam. If you want to fight over it, come talk to me after class. But, Samwise Gamgee is absolutely a hero in my book, so I put him up there too.
So he's also the hero.
I agree. I think it was left the way that it was on purpose, right? You want to think that Frodo maybe is a big deal, but I believe in my heart of hearts that Sam's the man.
Without
So,
Sam, Frodo.
yeah, wouldn't even made it.
Well, I thought
It's a short
the same
story.
When Chris Josh called us like, tell me selfish movie characters. And it was pretty easy to like rattle them off. And then he was like, now tell me some selfless movie characters. And every one of them, it was a debate. And it was very, very hard to come up with them. So, and Lane would list off people. I'm like, yeah, but they're just people and they don't really, in their roles, they're people and they're not typically selfless. So it was really interesting how much harder it is to find examples in the world of truly selfless people.
And I'd even asked him to go. I was like, pull from '90s culture, right? Like, it could be, we were throwing out, what'd you say, Balky from Perfect Strangers. Like we were reaching for people that we could throw up there. But Balky Bartokomous and his Happy Dance, for those that remember that. So some ideas, pictures to help elicit some words for some verbs, some words for selflessness. I did another word cloud. It's fun when you find a new toy to play with. I was like, ooh, look what I can do with this. And so it's probably a font you can't read. I know. So we have, visual design experts in our presence. And in my head, I kept running through and saying, what would JC say about this font? He would not like this font because he is brilliant with the work he does. So, and I'm just an amateur who found a toy to play with from a word cloud perspective. So aid, enhancing teams, benevolence, share, love, like a lot of things that you would think about from those previous pictures. So how would you describe a selfless leader? It can be someone you know. It can be a parent. It can be a friend. It can be a coworker. It can be a boss. But how would you describe them? Use some words to describe someone that's in your life that's a selfless leader. Forgiving. Good. I like that.
I do like the word love. That jumped out. When you give, back to the movie characters,
Mhm.
love is such an integral component of that. And it doesn't have to be a family member always. As Christians,
like that. Love is a good word. I agree.
Compassionate.
Compassionate. Good. I mean, a lot of amazing words to go with that.
I think selfless leader would be courageous too.
Courageous. I like that one a lot. We also did not pre-coordinate. Just letting everybody know. But yeah, courageous is an excellent word too. All right, selfless leadership. I'm going to pull from a book called The Selfless Leader. So funny story. Last night, Lainey was having a homework problem. And she said, Dad, please come help me with this homework problem. I'm like, yeah. And when they ask for help, I'm helping. And it was about citations. So I will stand in front of you all today saying, I am pretty sure I did not cite this correctly, but it's a free online PDF book you can download from that Kingdom Life Publishing website. I hope this Zoom call stays up, and I will give you all the information to it if you'd like it afterwards. I am pretty sure I didn't cite it right, and you can't really see it anyway with the Zoom stuff there, so maybe I shouldn't have even brought it up. But we powered through it last night where I think she figured out how to do citations correctly. And then as I'm trying to do the citations here, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm messing this up, and Lainey's teacher would be taking marks off. But a selfless leader is ethically leading others in the achievement of assigned goals and the greater good for the benefit of all others before oneself. Before oneself is a theme, right? Both with the Oxford Dictionary term and the way that this particular book is defining what a selfless leader looks like. I really like their definition. I like that they put the word ethically in there too, right? Like there are ways to achieve means. Some ways are right, some ways are not right, right? Being ethical in those choices, I think, is critical for a true selfless leader. So let's think about that as we go forward here. So, but before we do, I got a couple verses I want to talk about from a selfless and selfish perspective, right? So Philippians chapter 2, 3-8 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Again, a theme that we're starting to see here when it comes to being selfless. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also the interests of others. So that's very much like what, you did not do that. The rest of this is amazing. You just will have to take my word for it. So, I wonder if it's my side that's not happy.
It's because it's a time limit.
Yeah. Well, I thought we did pay for it though.
Well, I'm cheap and I stopped paying.
Well, that's okay. I appreciate you being cost effective in the things that you do. That's all right. So let's do that. So that should be sharing again. Oh no. Is there an HDMI? Is that how it was normally hooked up in here? Is with the HDMI from last week, or do I just need to reset? Did you have the cable in here? That might be a quicker fix than me doing this.
I think Patrick brought it to me.
Don't worry about it. I can do this. That's right then. Let's see, I just got to do this, and I got to do. Or I could spin the. Tell you what, I'll just keep going for now, and you'll assume that it's an amazing PowerPoint, right? So open your Bibles, if you would, Philippians chapter 2, verses 3-8. We will do it the old school way. And old school works fine by me. So Philippians 2, 3-8. Could I get I'll just finish this since I started it, right? So each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also the interests of others. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. So talk to me about this particular passage, Philippians chapter 2, 3-8.
I like, even it's in the King James one, verse 6, who in being in the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself a reputation and took on the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. So making, like, knowing that he is and then choosing to humble himself. Like whenever he was called good master, and he said, why do you call me good? Don't call me good, only one is good, that's the Father. Just choosing once again to like lead as an example for what we were supposed to do, the manual, to make us that written copy of how he acted in specific situations.
So I like how you said that. So he made himself less than God, right? And he made himself, oh, look at that. Thank you so much. We're back. It means I can stop this nonsense here too. Well, it's not really in the way, so maybe I won't worry about it. Nope. All right, so he didn't consider equality with God something for him to grasp, right? Something for him to do. He poured himself out. We're gonna talk about that a little bit as well. He made himself a human, and then what did he do for all of us, right? He sacrificed himself on the cross, right? So when we think about selfless leadership, right? I know that all of us are going to think to Christ, right? And I think that that's the point of this too, right? When we talk about what does it mean to be a selfless leader, even in, whether it's in our house, whether it's in our school, whether it's in our church, whether it's in our business, our company, or whatever it might be, right? We are to emulate Christ, and Christ as the, as the least of us, right? Poured himself out for us, right? So as we go through a couple of these verses, right? Just remember when we try to emulate selfless leadership, Christ is setting an amazing bar for us to follow, amazing example for us to try and follow in his footsteps there. All right, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through the first part of 8. I called it A. It's not A in your Bible, but I stopped a little short of the full verse. So love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it's not proud, it's not rude, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres, not preserves. That's a different thing. Love never fails, right? So I like this verse. This is why I like this verse. I like all verses, but I like this one because it sets all the not things first, right? Kind of like what we did. Hey, here's all these bad examples that you don't want to be like. So this verse is kind of doing the same thing. And then it follows up with a couple of good ones, right? So the good things that it points out, protects, trusts, hopes, perseveres. I wanted to say preserves again. Perseveres, and it never fails. Back to the word love, right? Like we talked about. Why would a person do these things? Why would you want to be a selfless leader in a world? That's what the world would ask us, right? Why would you want to do that? Because we're trying to follow Christ, because of love, right? Because of all of these things that this verse is laying out for us to be and to not to be too, right? So I think that's important. What jumps out at you about this verse or the previous verse, or thoughts that are just running through your mind? Doesn't boast. Yep. I like that one for sure. I've seen a lot of boastful leaders before. You probably have too. Mike Bosley is not a boastful leader. All right, Mark chapter 12, 29 through 31. The most important one answered Jesus is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Again, the word love, right? And when you sit there and say, love your neighbor, as yourself, right? Love your neighbor as yourself, right? That sets a bar for us. And if these are the two most important commandments, that sets a really powerful bar for us to try and follow. Yeah.
As we were looking at this, another word in Philippians that popped out that often shows up in these same kind of books is the idea of a selfless or a servant leader.
Servant. Mm-hmm.
The servant giving that additional flavor of you're doing something not for yourself, but specifically addressing a need that somebody else has. So it's one thing to be selfless. I'm not doing things for my own interest, but as a servant, doing something specifically to help somebody else. And I think that ties that all together very well.
And obviously Christ does a great job of emulating that for us too, all the way to the whole washing the feet story where, you're going to let me do this, and no, you're not going to do that. Oh, no, I am going to do that. Oh, yeah, go ahead and do it, right? Like all the way down to, him washing the feet of those that were with him, right? From a servant perspective, I think that you're absolutely right. That's another word, a good word to pull in. I completely agree. All right, every good lesson has some bullet points in it, right? So what are the points here that we want to get across? So this particular book that I am certain I cited incorrectly in this PowerPoint presentation speaks to 7 areas where we can work to become a selfless leader. And again, I want to make this really clear. You all are leaders, whether you want to admit it or not, right? You, again, do not have to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company to be considered a leader. There is somebody in your life that considers you a leader, I will promise you, right? So if we're if we're mindful of these scriptures that have been talking about what we're being asked to do, if we're mindful of the idea that we need to emulate Christ in the things that we say and the interactions that we have, right? So what are some ways that we should consider when we want to become a better, that sounds funny, when we want to be a better selfless leader, when we want to be a more selfless leader, perhaps is the way to say it, when we want to get better at being the kind of leader that we know that we're called to be. So make doing and accomplishing good your guiding goal, live and speak truth, exercise courage, model and reward desired behaviors, practice trust, invest in transformative relationships, and have patient and peaceful expectations. Any of these surprise you? If so, which one? Because I'd love to hear about it. No surprises. Okay. I'm
I
okay.
like number 6.
Number 6.
Transformative relationships. I find, and I do take it to work, right? I find that at work it can be hard to do that just because that's a time-consuming effort. But I see people that do that, and they are the people that you consider to be selfless, right? They're the people that invest in other people. They're the people that try to change other people. That one, it was not the one that would come to mind, but it absolutely speaks to me.
So Jen and I have been talking a little bit. It's surprisingly small how much a few kind words can have such a huge impact on a person. And I like how she says it too. The word invest is an important word there. It is not a drive-by, hey, I saw you on the way to the bathroom, or we happen to be standing at the microwave at the same time, right? Or, that's a work environment. Or even with your kids, right? Hey, we passed each other when I dropped you off from school and you were on your way to a practice or something like that. Like, it's sitting down. The word invest is there for a reason. Investing is time consuming, right?
It goes, for me, it goes in hand in hand with number 7 too. Like, even just at work today and many other days, there'll be, I'll end up feeling like talk to somebody, and they're not like a believer or anything, but just like having a meaningful conversation with them and really hearing them out where they're coming from, and more often than not, through investing in that conversation, God gives opportunities and appointments to witness to them, and I have most of them are very, very, very receiving, even if they're not believers. So it's like, I think last week it was humility is listening to others and being patient with others, even if you know you're right, or even when you know you're right. So really just dying to yourself and being meek, and really embodying meekness and becoming, like it says in the Bible, becoming weak for others. So it gives them, so many people won't receive a rebuke because when they haven't opened themselves up for a rebuke. And so being meek, being weak for others, more often than not, will open up somebody for a genuine word.
So I really liked what you said early in your statement, where these ideas and concepts are effective not just on believers but on everybody, right? Nobody, at least nobody that I know, would prefer to have a terrible selfish teacher, or a terrible selfish parent, or a terrible selfish coworker or boss, right? We would all prefer the type of the responsiveness, the investment in time, the care, the attention, the ethical approach towards a common good goal, right? I mean, that's not a concept that's only reserved for the faithful, right? For believers, right? That's effective for everybody. So I really like the comment. Thank you for that. Oh, yes. Sorry.
Let me try not to derail you on number 7.
You're not derailing. Go for it.
That one is, in my brain, as we've read it, it's in many ways, it's a loaded and deceitful to a leader's statement. In this, it has the ability to trip you up. Under the auspices of, well, I'm being patient, I'm being peaceful among suffering, I can slip into tolerance, which isn't really at the best interest of the people that I'm leading. And so I think that that's that balancing act where we love and care about those that we are leading, whether it be the lost or the people that are working with us, enough to help them. What's the most love we can do is to secure their salvation, as opposed to, oh well, I'm gonna extend grace to them and under the auspices of patience be too tolerant. So that one to me is that ragged edge line of, am I being patient and peaceful enough, or am I being too tolerant?
So that patient word actually it struck some, some other thoughts too, right? They're very much in the same vein where you sit there. I don't know how many of you work in environments or are in a schooling environment or in an environment in general where your leadership is take all the time you want. Sure, you need another week, go ahead. That's fine. Like, I don't work there. I didn't go to school there. There's sometimes we're in a little bit more of a fast-paced environment, right? And so when you sit there and say, that's the long game, right? Be patient and peaceful, right? Because in the end, you're going to end up with a better relationship, environment, team, whatever, fill in the blank, right? But giving it the time to marinate and come along at the right pace is not something that the world typically allows you to have, right? So that patience term, right, on the ragged edge of a lot of things, patience and acceptance and, oh, sure, go ahead and take all the time that you need, right? It's not typically something that we get to hear a whole lot in our day-to-day environments as well. So that jumped out at me too. Yeah.
Patience and peaceful expectations of a person, not a task.
Sure.
You gotta get the work done in this tomorrow, get on it. But for them to grow to the point where they can do that without me telling them,
right,
is where you're patient. And you go back to 1 Corinthians 13, it says it always trusts, always hope, always trusts that they're going to get there, always hopes that they're going to get there. And it's always, it's not something.
Right. I like that. Good. Yeah.
Something that jumps out to me is number 2, live and speak truth, because if you don't, part of the Christian idiom, practice what you preach, people aren't going to follow you very well. Something that comes to mind is a show I watched called on Netflix called God's Favorite Idiots. Basically, there's a character on there, and I'm not kidding. He looks and talks like the British version of Joel Osteen. I'm not kidding. And he was like, he had this thing saying, only the righteous are right.
Interesting.
So in a way, he's so righteous, so he's only I'm right. And you see him in his office wanting getting towards like a big airplane, like a big private jet, and of course the devil was trying to talk him into it and everything, but still it was a really interesting way of seeing that,
Yeah, so I agree. I also like number 2, right? Living and speaking truth. If you're in a leadership role where your team starts to question the things that you say on a regular basis, your team's going to fall apart, right? You cannot be an effective leader if they can't trust you, if you say things that they can't rely on, right? So that's something. Let's go into each of these just a little bit, right? So number 1, make doing and accomplishing good your guiding goal, right? So eye on the prize, unified motivation, knowing your rights from your wrongs, right? Like you are setting out, as part of a team. And again, it's very tempting to think of this in the business sense. It's okay to think of this in a spiritual sense. It's okay to think of this in a family perspective too, right? As a congregation, we're marching towards 100 years of guiding, Christian families towards our end goal of, an eternity in heaven, right? That's a unifying goal that we all work towards, right? In your family unit, right? You may be pushing us to, we're gonna successfully get all of our homework turned in, and we're gonna make these decent grades, and we're gonna move us towards the goal of you eventually being able to fly out of this house and go do amazing things somewhere else. I know that that's a goal that we tend to have, and we're getting dangerously close on a couple of those. So, so that, there's a lot of goals that can happen from a family perspective too. So it's not just a business perspective where you're like, oh, we need to deliver our product with high quality by this date, right? It's very tempting to fall into that from a leadership argument perspective. Of course, that's applicable, but again, I believe in my heart of hearts, every one of you in here is a leader, not was a leader or will be a leader, is a leader right now, right? And You just have to recognize where it is in that day-to-day interaction where you do have that leadership role. Whether you're the frontline leader or you're leading a sub piece of another activity, and frankly, we're all on a team together too, right? We look to the leadership of our church. We're all members here at this congregation. We're all working towards a common goal here too. But while we have a leadership structure within the church, every one of our classes has leaders. Every one of our activities has leaders. Even in this room, as we set things up, right, we have leaders that are doing things. So, you are a leader. I'm just going to tell you whether you think that you are or not. So think about how we make accomplishing the good our guiding goal. It's really easy to think about from a spiritual perspective. I think we can apply it in some other areas too. Live and speak the truth. I like this one. Speak truth respectfully, tactfully, compassionately, mercifully, but consistently. As a leader, we need to be able to be relied upon, right? Like we have to say the things that are true, right? Believable, trustworthy, and in an appropriate manner too, right? I've seen truth delivered in some very harsh ways in the past. That can be very ineffective, right? So, compassionate, I think, was one of the words, right? Compassionately and mercifully. Those are important words there too.
Tactfully really stood out to me.
Yeah.
Proverbs 15:23, the second half of it says, "The word spoken in due season, oh how good it is." And I think that's really like pushing on tactfully and respectfully too. But like we were talking about earlier, like waiting for that right moment. If you're not already in a setting where you're just talking about it, waiting for that proper moment, being tactful about it, and due season. It makes it that much more better because the hearts are already open to it.
Yeah, I like the word tactfully too. Interestingly enough, one of our new leaders at work, tactful, is one of his favorite words too.
So, there are studies that say that employees really appreciate constructive feedback on their performance. And to me, this speaks a lot to that, right? They don't want you to sugarcoat how they're doing or to always only give them the positive or, it's speaking truthfully about their performance and giving them good feedback all the time because they want to do better too. But I think and it's not your truth either. It's live and speak
Truth. I like that. So, and that's a really valid point, right? Truth is not always sunflowers and daisies, right? Truth can be, hey, we've got a problem and we need to do something about it, right? So, and I think that all of us can relate to that. And I've been on the receiving end of some truth that's, sometimes hard to hear, but when you hear it, you're like, okay, we need to make a decision and we need to be better. And at least now we know, right? We got it on the table and now we can move forward from it. So, and I think that's just part of being a person, right? We all admit that we make mistakes, right? Every one of us would shake our heads up and down and say, yeah, I've made some mistakes. None of us like getting called out on it, right? I don't. But when it happens, right, if it comes from a respectable person that's using these kinds of, words as they deliver that truth, that makes it, I think, a little bit better, right? A little bit better to receive. Yeah.
We need to be dependable. A good leader needs to be dependable and loyal to the team. You can't say one thing to the team and then go out and badmouth your team to other people. Because eventually it gets back, and that gets back, so they don't trust you.
Yeah. Poison the well, yeah.
One thing that we were taught in the training is you criticize in private, but praise in public. And that builds everybody up. Or if you criticize somebody in public, it tears the whole team down.
I agree. There's a lot of, I didn't actually build them all on this slide, but there's a lot of talk about how great selfless leaders accept all blame and pass all praise, kind of like what you're saying, right? If there's things that the team needs to work on, you do that in private, but make sure that everybody's verbally, hearing that in public with all of the good things. That's first bill. I'm going to step it up a little bit. So exercise courage. Being selfless is risky, right? It can be dangerous to be a selfless leader, right? You may be put into a situation where you are not the popular person. Right? This idea of standing in the breach, right? Sometimes you'll need to stand in the moral or ethical breach against the rising tide of counter views and do what is right and what is necessary. That sounds hard. Being a selfless leader isn't always easy, right? But doing the right thing is what a selfless leader will do. Face dangers or risk with your fears and doing the right thing anyway, right? Can a selfless leader be afraid? Can a selfless leader want to get out of that situation or wish that it hadn't been pushed upon them? Absolutely. Here in a little bit, I'm going to ask you about how it relates to Christ. If I had more time, if I was managing my time better, we'd go into it even a little bit deeper. But think about that too, right? There's dangers and fears and risks that he faced that I think apply to that as well. So model and reward desired behaviors, right? I mean, I think we've known this since we, had our first pet in the house, right? We always had a lot of pets growing up, and when they do something good, you reward that behavior, right? And when they do something you prefer them not to do, you don't reward that behavior. So while we're not all puppies and kittens, right? Selfless leaders accept that they must be the example and model the behaviors that they expect, and then promptly recognize, reinforce, and reward that desired behavior. So you better act the way you want your people to act. And your people could be your kids, the people could be your classmates, people could be the people that you're teaching, right? If you don't think they're watching you and are going to emulate and think it's okay to do the things that you're doing, right? You got another thing coming. Right? If they see you doing bad behavior behind the scenes, they're going to do the same thing. So something to think about there too. 5, practice trust. Selfless leaders allow rising leaders in the team to define the ethical how and accomplishing a goal. Let me tell you, it's really hard with teams sometimes to say, I'm going to let you go and what we need to go do. I'm going to let you go do it. Like a lot of times from a leadership perspective, could you maybe do it faster? Maybe not. Would it be more in alignment with what you were hoping to get done the very first time if you did it? Maybe, right? A lot of times I get surprised by how great things turn out when you actually have trust in your team, right? And that's a hard thing to trust and let go of sometimes. But if you're, again, doing all these steps together, you're modeling the behavior that you expect, you're rewarding the behavior when you see it, getting to the point where they know what the goal is, right? They see that you're a trustworthy person. They know what the good goal that they're working towards is. And there are going to be leaders that rise in your teams. Again, teams aren't just in a work environment. But letting them define how they want to go about doing that is important, right? Demonstrate and practice trust. They know the intent, they're going to do it right, and you provide oversight, not micromanagement, right? Again, trusting your team, right? You've set the boundaries, you understand the goals, you're helping encourage them, you're invested in them. They can go and do some of these things. And if I don't move faster, I'm going to run out of time. 6. Yeah, go.
Makes me think of how Jeremy and John were so good at helping our become leaders. It's like they set these expectations and bars for them. So a lot of things in that trust section was the stature of that thought, and they really give them responsibility and they rise to that expectation every time. It's really cool to watch.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that. The kids come back from retreat or they come back from Colorado or wherever, right? Hey, we led these small groups. Hey, we did this thing. It's like, did you really?
And they like,
And they did great.
Like, you're all gonna have a cut for the whole weekend. I was like, they're never gonna do that. They're like, we all have a cut all weekend. I mean, this is like a year ago, but it's like little things you're like, wow.
My kid?
Really?
Really? Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. Invest in transformative relationships, right? So we talked about this, whether you're talking about investing in your coworkers or your employees, right? Spending time with them, getting to know them, right? Not just at work, not just at school, not just at your house, but actually getting to know people. That's an investment, right? And the idea of transformative leaders, right? When you build into people, right, that sets them up to be able to do that again. It replicates, right? And whether you're thinking about that in a business perspective at your work, or you're thinking about it from a Christian perspective in the spread of the gospel, did Jesus invest in personal relationships? Absolutely. I ran out of time. I'm going to go really fast for this last one. Have patient and peaceful expectations. Understand the development and growth leading to lasting reward takes time. Christ was patient too. Christ is patient with all of us still today. Right.
On that one,
Yeah.
both on the secular and spiritual side, there is I understand what Matt's saying. Both sides, there's an expectation of what your team is doing also. So patience and peaceful expectation when your team is striving and trying, and then you have not that it's a workspace now, it's not patient. But there's times when that wasn't the case, we wouldn't necessarily describe Jesus as patient and peaceful. And sometimes maybe with your team. So it's kind of this game with your kids, right? As long as they're doing their part, it kind of reciprocates back. And then if that line's crossed, then you've got to take a different approach to get them on the same page.
Sure.
To then reapply that.
Yeah, it goes back to that providing guidance thing, right? Don't micromanage, right? But guiding and supporting and helping, right? I keep telling people at work, my job, I try to make my job be the obstacle remover. Like they're the running back with the ball. Let me be the, you know, the lineman that will go and pancake people that are going to cause them problems, right? If I can help get other people out of your way so you can do your job, like that's what I want to do, right? So helping remove obstacles, not micromanaging everything that they do, right? Building in those expectations that they're running the ball in the right direction and we're just going to let them run. But watching them as they go, I think is important too. But yeah, I like, very good comment. So do we see Christ in these characteristics? Yes, we did. I would love to spend time on it, but I've messed up my time management. And then I'll end with this. For Mark chapter 10, verse 45, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. The very perfect example of a selfless leader literally did not come to be served, but to serve, and he gave his life for it. I would take questions, but I'm going to make you miss all the good cookies. So I really appreciate the conversations today. I really like the class participation. Hopefully you were able to get a few things out of it. If you're interested in the book that these snippets come out of, I'm more than happy to email it to you or send it to you. But otherwise, I'll just say you're sent because I know that that's what we're trained to leave on. So you're sent, and I appreciate you all.